want to get your initial reaction. We got the disclosure bit, we got the index bit, but we didn't really get any details around tax incentives. Were you disappointed?
Well, first of all, good morning, Sherry. Thank you for having me here. I wouldn't say people were overly disappointed. So the first step was organized by the Korean Stock Exchange and the regulators. And when you think about tax incentive changes, that is legislation that requires legislative actions. There is mention of further steps around taxations to come. So we think this is really just the first step in a series of actions and potential changes to come.
Do you think the tax-related legislation and changes to commercial law will actually happen in the timeline that you have in mind, given the political backdrop that we have in South Korea, where the ruling party doesn't have a majority in the National Assembly? It will be difficult to really navigate.
Yes, absolutely. So if you look back to the expectations in February when the program was first announced, inheritance tax changes was a focus, and that probably will have a fairly meaningful impact on the behavior of some of the controlling shareholders. Putting more emphasis on share price as relates to their own financial interest longer term. That's unlikely to happen post the election. However, if you look at the platforms from the ruling party and the opposition party, at this point, there are some agreements, particularly as it relates to dividend tax reform, dividend income tax reform. So we think there are common grounds between the two parties, and potentially that can happen. Now, all that being said, I would say none of these actions will lead to overnight changes in corporate behavior, and for us long-term investors, kind of not necessarily overnight changes in the financial returns of the company. However, it really does move this sort of take a step forward in aligning shareholder interest, sort of controlling shareholder interest, and potentially broader investing public's interest. And that's a good thing to happen.
Right. Let's suppose that we get the tax benefits. When the culture is not really there, because a lot of family-owned large conglomerates, chaebols, are not really familiar with this idea of corporate reform measures and really prioritizing minority shareholders in their strategy book, the execution is very important. How optimistic are you around that scenario? Do you think that South Korea will get it right at some point? Could it be 5 years, 10 years down the road?
Hopefully not that long, because good corporate governance, good returns, good use of capital is good for the economy overall. Now, if you look at Japan, for example, kind of taking a look across the ocean, so to speak, there has been a lot of top-down initiatives announced, but everything has come down to the company-specific execution. So I think it will take some time for some of these changes to come through in South Korea as well. But the first thing around, improving the quality of corporate boards, focusing their fiduciary duty on not just the company itself, but really shareholders at the end of the day, and changing some of the rules around kind of how tender offers can be conducted, how M&A can be conducted. All of these things will have an impact cumulatively over time. And it's really for long-term shareholders.